everybody, it's been a while, but I have about an hour before I hit the climbing gym, and I figured I'd take the time to actually just walk you through something I created back in the spring. So let's take, for example, you have an application, you already have, your DevOps, your dev environment, your production environment, and now the application is mature enough, or you're just doing crazy things, that you want to create dynamic environments. So basically, I want to deploy my feature branches and I want everything to work. It creates a Docker image that gets then published. There's a URL with TLS that already works that I can send to my stakeholders to approve, etc. So let's get right down to it. So what I want to walk through today is actually open source and public on GitHub. So I'll post the URL in the description and you can check it out. It already has some pipelines, and it's in here, GitHub Workflows feature deploy. So we'll walk through the markdown in a little bit in Visual Studio, so it's a little bit easier to see. Before we do that, let's look at what this application looks like locally. So it's a random app. It has like a form and things like that. The reason why you would want a dynamic environment is to basically be able to change something like totally random. So I guess I can't use the variables. I have to hard code a variable. If I come into here, let me just grab like this random orange. So theoretically, what I can do is, and you see here at the bottom, it's loading. It will basically change a color. Let's pop this into Git. Okay, I have a bunch of other things that I haven't done yet. So whatever. What we're basically gonna do is create a new branch, and I'm gonna call it feat UI orange. And basically I want to be able to automatically deploy this into its own URL, etc., just because it's prefixed with feat/. So let's do that, and let's add all of this. And I'm gonna call it, I'm gonna use a shortcut again, testing feature deploy for GitHub. I have to remember not to delete this branch because apparently I was playing with other stuff. Deploy. Okay. I need my keys. Hang on. So as usual, Paranoid Julie has this on the YubiKey, and I just realized I don't have any USB ports. So I found an adapter, and now it's hooked into the monitor. So let's see if this works. Yes, it found it. Okay, we're gonna do a push and set the upstream so that it always knows to just push to the origin remote, which is GitHub. And so I created a new branch. What we can do is, let's get away from that horrible orange, which I'll probably regret building. And you'll see that immediately this branch has triggered this pipeline. Let's try to make sense of what's going on in the pipeline with a whiteboard. And basically imagine if you have a Kubernetes cluster. Well, this is the cluster that I'm using for this demo. It's one cluster, I have various applications running in it, and each application has its own namespace. Now, within that namespace, you might have multiple microservices or deployments or whatever you want to call it. Now, what happens if we say we want to do a feature deploy? So you have to make some decisions. What I'm going to do is actually just put everything in that namespace for that application. So you might have a scenario where teams only have access to their own namespace. They don't have the ability to create yet another namespace to put stuff in. This is just the easiest way to do it, and that's what I decided to do. And so you'll see that the different kind of deployments that are happening, it will be based on branch names. So as many number of feature deploys I have, it will be in there. One thing to really keep in mind is that if you do this, your dev cluster is going to be actually potentially significantly bigger than your other clusters and your other pre-production clusters. So make sure you have the ability to scale up and down, and that you have the right hardware, so better VM, so that it can handle all that kind of activity that's going on. So we're going to use the naming convention for everything, including the container image tags. So I have a Azure Container Registry in this case. Let's say the container image itself is called app, whatever it is. I think mine is called like Cloud Review or something. So a tag, you would normally think, oh, okay, it's like 1.4, 2.0, etc. Yes, that's for production. How this repository also works, and I shortened the git SHA because there was too many nines. When I create a dev image, which is off the main branch, I take the commit SHA and make it a suffix. And I promote it up the chain by actually retagging as opposed to rebuilding using the exact same git SHA. So just for the hell of it, because it's a feature branch, and we don't really care too much about the commit differences because it's meant to be unstable. And so that I have an example for it, I'm actually going to use the same tag over and over. And so we're going to take something like feet/foo-bar and make it feet-foo-bar. There are consequences when you use that in your Kubernetes cluster because, to be efficient, your VM might actually cache those images. And it might not pull new ones. So you have to configure your cluster to say, maybe pull the new image. And also if your application's already running, you need to restart it in general so that it actually grabs new ones. Okay, let's come back to the pipeline and we see that it ran. Earlier I said this would run and then I just realized, nope, it won't. Because I have a very specific custom build and push, oh, that's a typo, in this pipeline. So it ran. Theoretically, it created a new URL. Let's see if I remember what it was called, architecture review, and I think I called it feet, what was the name of the branch? UI orange or something? Yeah, UI orange. So feet-UI-orange. And you can see we have that ugly ass orange. Let's, just so that you can see it in action, because it might take a while, and I want to make sure I don't delete this locally. I'm just going to delete it on GitHub. So what I'm going to do is a git push, and whenever you have a colon with like nothing in front of it, it's actually just going to delete that branch. So let's do UI orange. Okay, you can see it said it deleted the UI orange branch, and before I am stupidly going to forget, let's see, to delete this, I'm going to rename it and call it, let's go back to work in progress, which usually I double check before I delete. So this ran again, right? And you will see that there's no branch here. There's just sort of a delete event. And the only thing that ran was the cleanup. So the cleanup goes through, deletes the deployment, and it deletes the Docker image from the container registry. I just realized I should probably show you on the Kubernetes side what this looks like. So I'm actually just going to pick the header and change this to Cloud YouTube Demo, if I can spell YouTube correctly. So let's do that. Check out new branch, YouTube Demo. So we're going to do that. I'm just going to make some random commit message. It doesn't matter so much. Let's see. Let's push this out. Okay, now we've pushed it. So let's just double check it is running. Let's open that instead of closing that. So this is happening right now. So what I have open here is K9s. So if I look at all the repos, it will show lots of different pods that are running. Let's just go to my namespace, which is architecture review, and theoretically something should pop up. So we're finally getting to the point where it's pushing the image to container registry, so it actually hasn't applied any Kubernetes manifest yet, and you can see it's doing that now. So let's come over here and you can see that something is already popping up. It has a temp prefix, I guess, that I put in front of it. And it also has the YouTube demo suffix based on the branch name. Let's look at what's going on here, and you'll see that it's trying to pull it. And is it doing anything? Yeah, it's Kubernetes, right? So it'll eventually just kind of like pick everything up and be running. It says it's running now, which means it managed to grab the image. Yep, it successfully pulled, it started and created the container. So if I go to, and I already forgot what I called it, feet YouTube demo. So let's go back to here, and it's going to be feet YouTube demo. And you can see it here, it says YouTube demo, voila. The way this works, why it also has TLS, is because the Ingress controller has a wildcard certificate. So anything that is a subdomain of the dev.cloudcube.io, I can put whatever I want in there. I don't have to explicitly get an extra certificate. Okay, let's look through the YAML pipeline. So we have some variables. This is my particular cluster, the Azure Container Registry name, the base tag. You can see it says front end. I put in the namespace up here. And then here comes some funky stuff with like search and replace and all that stuff. So CI is pretty simple, right? Like I want to do whatever test linting that I normally do. Setting up the variables I always have to do for this particular application, just so it knows where to put what, depending upon whether it's dev or staging, etc. The first part that's kind of confusing is this, and actually it's too big, so it doesn't fit on one line. There we go. So this is kind of like the confusing bit, and when you do pipelines in real life, they're a bit messy based on the limitations that you have in the tooling. So this is a limitation of YAML pipelines. Basically what this does is, and I've sort of just written it out in JavaScript to make it look a little bit simple. It just basically says, okay, what type of event name is it? Is it a push or is it a delete? And what's different is, unfortunately, how do you grab that git SHA? So for push event, it's here. Ref name under GitHub, and for delete, it's under the event subproperty or object or whatever you want to call it. To make it look a little bit nicer, you can also think of it this way. This is how I tend to write my logic sometimes as ternary conditions. So basically that's what it says, even though it's like a little bit like messier than that. There's a lot of stuff that I also have to do just to make everything work. And one of them you see here, the format function from GitHub. Now, if we look at the documentation, what this does is format basically says, and let's just make this bigger. Where'd it go? Format is literally replaced. It's actually quite dumb. It's like, here, let's put Mona here, let's put the here, and let's put Octocat here. We need actually something a little bit more advanced. And so if we go take, here's Visual Studio Code. Let's take this, which is lovely and piped. If we come back here, so let's just say echo foo YouTube demo. All right, so this is the string that I get. I'm gonna pipe it to this. Why did it stop working? Oh, that. And what you can see what it does is basically it takes any slash that you have and turns it into a dash. Now, what's separate or different about this is that it's not just replace, it's search and replace. And so basically this is a regular expression, and I think in this temporary file, I even looked at this or put this here to make it a little bit easier to understand. So you have a s/ for substitute, I think. This is your regular expression that you're searching for. So I'm searching for all the slashes, and I'm going to replace it with a dash. And then for flags, I think I have G for global. And let me just come back and double check. It's easier here a little bit. Yeah, so you see that I have substitute. I'm looking for forward slashes, which I have to escape with a backslash. I have a dash here, which I think I also need to escape, or yeah, I don't know why, actually. Oh no, the other forward slash is in between. It wraps around the regular expression, which is the backslash. Yeah, go read this again. It takes a little bit of time. Anywho, so that's what that does in the pipeline. And I think for most of the rest of it, you can kind of read through it and figure out what it does. I have two different types of logins because this is a Azure AD integrated cluster, which means there are no local Kubernetes cluster local accounts. And so they all have to be integrated into Azure AD, which means I log into Azure AD. And I have to convert the Azure AD token to something that the cluster understands, which is what that does. I put it in its own Docker build step here. I think probably because I have a bunch of security checks in the other Docker pipeline. So I just want to skip that for this. You'll see here that we have customize in some places, I think. No, I chose not to do it, which probably means that there was something that made it much more complex. Okay, here, so I restart the pods. And that's because if your pod is already running with a particular tag, it's fine. And so it's not going to say, oops, let me grab a different one. For all intents and purposes, in terms of the YAML, it's the same. So if we restart it, and if the cluster is configured to not cache those images, then it'll pull a new one down. Let's walk through delete, right? So we're putting all these pods in there. We want to make sure we actually clean them up. And so this is kind of like the reverse of what you saw above. Instead of kubectl apply, we have kubectl delete. The other thing that we have to do, of course, is clean up our registry. So here I explicitly actually clean it up, go in, delete the image name, and it figures out, the configuration already figures out the Docker tag. And then I log out of the cluster. Another thing that's interesting that is in here, let's see, GitHub Workflows, and one of them should be, what is it called? Housekeeping, which sounds nice. So I have another pipeline that runs Mondays at 6 a.m. I could also run it manually if I wanted to. And basically it goes through my container registry and looks for these patterns, and it will actually clean things up. I don't have to worry about it removing images that are old, right? Like super old, because I still say keep last. And so this can like run regularly. And I think if I go check in the repository actions, housekeeping, it last ran last Monday. And if I click here, let's see if it found anything. Probably not. I haven't been doing anything recently. It deleted a manifest. So maybe not a tag, but it deleted a manifest. Yeah, so, I mean, you could rely on that, but I'm super pedantic. And so if I know I'm deleting it, let me just delete the image then right now. So yeah, I think that's it. So this wraps up hopefully a quick video as I walk you through something I built a long time ago, but I tried to at least walking through you some code. Wow, that's horrible English, shows how tired I am. Walking through some code with you, as well as drawing a couple of quick whiteboards that you understand how to basically implement in theory, or the basics of doing dynamic environments. Including things to consider, like do you have enough infrastructure resources? So do you autoscale your cluster, etc., to be able to do that? And of course, the most important thing is coming up with a naming convention, or sorry, just a convention that works for you, right? So I use the feat / and naming something itself is not that hard, but all the logic that you have, the patterns that you have in your YAML manifests, for Kubernetes, in your YAML pipelines for GitHub Actions or Azure pipelines, or if you use Jenkins pipelines. It's just that pattern. You kind of just have to like guess at every stage what the name could be. And with practice and experience, you just learn, oh, this is what I like to use. Now, the other thing that's really hard is to figure out how, you know what you want as an end result. I want a separate URL that I can send to stakeholders to approve, or whatever your requirement is. But where do you put it? Like on which cluster, in which namespace, etc. Those types of decisions are really hard to make if you're working with various people, various stakeholders, who has to pay for it, if you're sharing cluster with somebody else, yada, yada, yada. I just did the simplest thing, threw it in the same namespace. So, yeah, so I'm trying to, every now and then, it seems like I can't do the twice a month rhythm, so once a month, something random. I would love to do more that kind of go together in a series, but oh well. Random thing I built like half a year ago that is hopefully useful for you. All right, that's it. Have a good one. Bye.